years of like rec ball when he was younger. Never really had a chance to play. He was from Baltimore originally, so was a big Orioles fan growing up. And so when he had me and my brother, always kind of, just at least introduce the game to us. And I took a liking to it right away at 5 years old in T-ball, and just was always drawn to the strategy of the game and such. Even though I was never the best player on any teams that I played on, I understood how the game was played and the strategy involved. And so for me, and I never really had a lot of people when I was younger. I never had pro guys that I was learning from. It was dads. And so they did the best they could and taught the game the best they could. And very fortunate most of my career to be around people that just were there because they loved the game and they were willing to give back to the players that they taught. So, and then as I got older, I think, when I was young, 10, 11, I told people, I'm going to play in the big leagues. And then as you get older, you realize it's not that easy. It's not that common to happen. There's only been, I think, 20,000 people, a little over 20,000 ever to play the game. So as I got older, I kind of adjusted my thought process and was like, man, if from high school, if I can play in college and get a scholarship, everything else after that is gravy. I would love to play, minor league ball to get a baseball card made just to show my kids maybe one day down the road, and was very fortunate that I got an opportunity to go both to the minor leagues and forward after that. So
you weren't a big travel ball. You weren't playing like every day of the week as you were growing up.
They didn't have travel ball. Travel ball wasn't an entity back then. We if you were good, you had your little league, or I started in boys club actually, and so we had boys and girls clubs. So I played there, and then the big jump was to little league. You were big time if you played little league back then. Fields were nicer, balls were cleaner, uniforms were better looking, and if you were good, you played American Legion ball in the summertime. And typically there were only like two teams. There was like the A team and the B team, and if you didn't make one of those two teams, then you kind of just went and played another sport, or just hung out with your friends, biked around the neighborhood, whatever the case may be. Now I think people have understood the monetary aspect of things. And if they, if there was only two teams, but there's a lot of other people that want to play, well, there's a way that we can monetize that and get everybody involved. And so that's kind of what it's morphed into a little bit, and not necessarily a bad thing. There's people that get an opportunity that otherwise might not have, but there's some that are run very well and some that are not so well run. So, that's anything, I guess, though.
I guess so.
Were you a multi-sport guy, or was baseball just your thing? Or
baseball, I'll tell you, like nowadays, kids play year round. I mean, there's no breaks whatsoever. I took breaks off. I mean, you'd play in the fall and you'd have a month off, and you'd play in the spring and you'd have a month off before summertime for American Legion ball. But I was always riding my bike and shooting baskets with my buddies, or playing tackle football, throwing the frisbee. I mean, that is kids. I mean, I don't think a lot of kids do that nowadays. Go out and just play. I think everybody, the advent of computers and social media, I don't think a lot of kids do it as much as we did as kids. But yeah, baseball was I played flag football a year. I ran cross country 1 year in high school, my senior year, to get ready to run a lot more in college. But for the most part, organized sports-wise, baseball was the one thing that I played.
Yes.
So, quick question. You were talking about you didn't really play a lot of you talking about organized sports.
Sure.
You played you grew. I'm a little older than you are. Well, I'm probably quite a bit older than you are. But we both grew up the same way. When you talk about playing or doing some type of sport, it was outside.
Absolutely.
They pushed you out the door and locked it behind you and told you to come back when the street lights came on.
Absolutely.
And
there were plenty of people around. I mean, we had a dozen people around our neighborhood. So you just rode your bike from door to door to door and said, "Hey, so-and-so home, can they come play?" And, you at minimum, you get 4 people. So you had 2-on-2 tackle football games down at the church field, or let's go down with a bucket of balls and hit ground balls to each other. And then we'll throw BP to each other. So kind of self-motivated. It didn't take an adult necessarily. You wanted to do it just because you enjoyed it. So, I don't know if I had the video games and the virtual reality stuff back then, would I have been as inclined to go outside? Probably, but there's a lot of things nowadays for kids to, occupy their attention. So I feel for them a little bit. I try to minimize it with my two sons as much as I can. So keep them as busy as you can, and hopefully they won't go that route as often. So.
Yeah, and it's almost the thing. Like, I know when I was growing up, video games were becoming pretty popular, But like, so I had an uncle that was 2 years older than me, and we had where he lived. There was some kids in the neighborhood and stuff would come over and come play some every now and then, or we get a friend over and play ball in the yard. But we learned so much about the game just competing against each other. And then the only time we really got on a video game is when it was bad weather outside, lightning and stuff, or it was dark.
Yeah.
And then, which, I mean, like you're talking about now, the stuff that they have now, man, it'll look like you're playing, like the virtual reality, it'll look like you're playing baseball in the yard on that thing.
Exactly.
It's a daggone video game, which is pretty insane to think about. But it's crazy how that stuff and what's crazy to do with them video games, too, is like Major League Baseball is getting to where they're using that kind of stuff to see pitchers before they go out for an outing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
it's another way to train, for sure.
Oh, yeah. It's just all about how you use it. It seems like, it's like, is that your goal? Is that your focus? Then go run with it. But
right. And I was going back, I was very lucky. My dad used to commute back and forth a lot for work. So he would go a lot of times. He would drive an hour and a half each way to work. And so there were times where I would meet him at the door with the gloves, and we had probably about half an hour of daylight left. And, he'd come in, and I know he was smoked from driving back and forth and working all day, but I wanted to throw. And so he would, change clothes real quick, come out with the catcher's mitt and catch me. And there's a lot of friends growing up. They're like, I remember that like it was yesterday, you throwing on the sidewalk by your house. We lived on a corner lot, and, just me throwing to my dad. I could do that every day growing up, and just learned a lot about, just the mental side of pitching stuff. Even though my dad didn't play very far as a player, just, what are you thinking about pitch wise, and what are you trying to do in certain counts and such. So I was very fortunate to have him. If he wouldn't have pushed me when I was younger, because at a certain point, Colby too, if you don't drive yourself at a certain age, you aren't going to get to your ultimate goals. So you have to be kind of self-motivated at a certain age. And as a young player, I'm very fortunate that I had not only my dad, but a lot of coaches that, they kind of pushed me to do and be accountable with my work that I did off the field or on the field. And then when I got to a certain age, I was like, hey, if I want to get to the big leagues, when I talk about that, is it going to be a pipe dream, or is it something that I really have a chance? I got to put the time in. I got to have the work ethic. I have to have the drive. Otherwise, I'm just delusional a little bit. So.
Exactly. It's an all or nothing game. That's what's so special about it.
Yeah.
You can't be halfway in because the game knows.
And there's a certain time window that you have a chance. I mean, you can't be 38 years old and go, hey, I think I'm going to try to play. I mean, it's a young person's game. And so, you got to get after it when you have the opportunity. Otherwise that door may close on you. So, it's tough, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think you would either. So.
Exactly.
When you were coming up through school, were you one of those 1% athletes? Like you were every field you ever took, or every diamond that you ever stepped on, were you one of those 1% guys? You knew you were one of the better players on the team?
Absolutely not. I wish I could say I was, but I was not. And I remember talking to my dad when I was in college, and he said, when you were young and when you were in high school, we used to drive to like Little League games, for instance, and he used to have me in the back seat. He'd say, how do you feel today? And there were times where I was like, I feel really good. He said, you had a chance to compete those days. He said, days where I said, hey, how do you feel? And I said, I'm okay. He said, you didn't compete any of those days. Like mentally, you weren't where you needed to be before you even got to the field. And you probably did not rise to the occasion as much as or grind through a tough outing. So I feel like the older I got, I think I really started turning in college. I quit my junior year of high school just with some politics and such. Everybody goes through politics, whether it's in Little League or travel ball or high school, college. I just happened to go through them a little bit more so in high school, and quit my junior year just because it started to affect personal relationships, started to affect my grades. So I kind of stepped away. And for me, I talked to a lot of the players here locally about that. It was kind of a gut check for me. Like, do I want to really go hard this way, or am I happy being away from the game? And maybe I want to go choose something else to be passionate about. So for me, that was really an awakening moment, and made me realize, like, if I really want to play college ball or beyond, I need to change my habits. I needed to change my mindset and really start to work even more so than what I thought I was doing at the time. And so that and we won a state championship for our American Legion team that summer. After the spring that I quit, we won the state championship that summer. I went to a kind of a showcase in the fall of my senior year, and 2-day event. I threw really well, and I had good grades. And one of the coaches there that I talked to ended up getting a full ride there to the University of North Florida. So, but was I one of the 1%ers? No, I felt like, I weighed 152 pounds when I graduated high school at 6'3". I probably topped out at 80. So then when I got to college, I was like, hey, I know I'm weaker and I'm smaller than most of the people here. So I tried to search out people that could help me gain weight or get stronger or whatever the case may be, if that was my ultimate goal. So I went and talked to a nutritionist on campus and told me kind of how to eat a little bit differently. And so by the time I left college, I was probably 87, 88 miles an hour. Still was an unfinished product, quite honestly. Weighed 195 pounds. So was better than I was in high school, but still needed work to be done. And then that's why I ended up going to the Frontier League. Didn't get drafted my senior year. We were a little bit young, and I didn't have an overwhelming senior year necessary to get drafted necessarily. So I ended up going up to Chillicothe, Ohio, and working on some of my perceived weaknesses. And, that kind of opened the door for me to get into the minor leagues, affiliated minor leagues. So, but I look back in my whole career, and I don't think that I was ever, to your point, the 1%. I was one of the better pitchers, but I never looked at myself and said, I am the ace of this staff. I mean, maybe other people thought that at times, but I always felt like I would get a little bit of complacency if I ever thought that. I was never happy with where I was at. I could be better. And so I think if you always, and guys along my career, the Tony Gwynns, the Trevor Hoffmans, those guys were like so driven and so like singular focused to be the best. They were not happy. Even if they were dominating, there was something that they could be better at. And so I tried to take a little bit of that mindset the further along in the game that I played. And I think that benefited me, and, continued to have the right work ethic. So
it's funny to me, like you hear the stories of the late bloomer type guys, like, oh, this guy was a small kid at this age, and then he grew and this happened. Like so many guys I've met in pro ball that are, very peak. Like obviously I've met a few major leaguers, and it's crazy to me how you'll see that as a common theme more than you would think. Like when I was a kid, I was that small kid, which obviously I'm not a major leaguer, but and just thinking about like, hey, this is this much harder for me because I'm smaller, and like you don't really think, hey, the tide can turn one day, and then you hit the growing spurt, or you put on weight, and then boom, the fastball goes up, and then your life changes. It's pretty cool to hear it from your perspective too. I mean, you talk about less than 1% of people to get to the big leagues. You're one of those guys, and at that point in time, you were not this mature kid, that physically mature kid that was just way bigger than everybody, and that's why he was good. And obviously there are kids that are big. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, these big kids aren't as good and they're better because they're bigger or whatever. But there's some kids like that.
Well, I think to your point, I think there's a lot of kids when you're 10, 11 years old, and there's guys that you're playing against that have like mustaches and full beards, and you're like, dude, I not even 100 pounds yet, and they're so dominating against you. You don't realize at the time, like they're just a little bit more physically mature. Once you hit that growth spurt, you hit puberty, whatever, it's a whole different ball game, and it levels the playing field a little bit. And a lot of people, I think like 12 years old is the age where a lot of people start walking away from the game. And it is kind of sad. I just try to keep people and keep them engaged in the game, have fun, and wait until you get to puberty. And then if you decide that you want to walk away from then, but for me, like baseball was a means to an end for me. The pro ball was gravy. That's what my dreams was always going to be. But I was like, if I can graduate college debt free, that is, a big strain on my family, me personally. And so for me, that was like the singular focus out of high school. And so if that's what the mindset is for some of these younger kids in high school to go, hey, I don't care where you go. I don't care if you win a national championship. I don't care if you play for a Division I program. Go to college, get some money. That's just less money that you got to dig a hole out of debt-wise when you graduate. So, but yeah, it is kind of interesting because Billy Wagner is a buddy of mine as well, and he was a guy that was like 5'8" when he graduated high school. Had one offer in Virginia. I think he threw like 78 miles an hour, and then he's a guy blowing triple digits. In the big leagues, I think he has the most saves of any left-hander in modern day baseball. Crazy how things work, but you just got to have a little stick-to-itiveness sometimes, and just continue to work. And my college coach always said, play as hard as you can and let them take the jersey from you. Don't give it to them. So
exactly.
So
that's awesome.
Well, Kobe and I, we know this fact. Our audience doesn't. We prepared for the show. We were ready for you. And you kind of blew right through the whole days in the Frontier League. The reason you didn't stay in the Frontier League long is because you dominated it to the point that they actually named an award after you in the Frontier League. So why don't you give a little of that back history and let our listeners know exactly how your name ended up on a trophy.
So I played in, 94 was my last year, my senior year at North Florida. And I thought I threw a little over 100 innings. I had decent numbers, not overwhelming, not, all district or anything like that. I would pitch on Friday night and I would come in and close on Sunday. So after a while, that kind of took a toll on your arm, just because we didn't have a clear-cut closer at that time. And, towards the end of the year, I asked my head coach, Dusty Rhodes, did he think I was going to get drafted? And he said, if so, it'd be late. It may be a free agent signing. But in the meantime, there was this league, the Frontier League, that was going to be their second year of existence. And a couple of our middle infield guys, I think our second baseman and our third baseman were going up for an open tryout up to Ohio. And if that was something that I wanted to do, he would make it happen. And I got off the phone with him. This was right around the end of we got beat in the regionals that year, one game away from the World Series. And I got off the phone, and my mom was like, "What'd he say?" And I said, "Well, he said, maybe get drafted, maybe not. Go up to this thing up in Ohio." And I was like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, you're never going to know unless you try." And I was like, "I've never been to Ohio. I don't know what's up there, whatever." And she's like, "What do you got to lose?" And so I was like, I think I was trying to fight it as much as I can and just complain. And so I was like, well, I don't want to put miles on my car. So she's like, well, just rent a car then. Like, quit being difficult. And so me and my brother rode up there, and we met the other two guys. And it was like literally a one-day event. There were probably 25 guys out there. And the setup was, it was up in Chillicothe, Ohio. Kind of between Columbus and Cincinnati. And they had infield, outfield, and the two guys that came up there with me were just lights out. They did fantastic. They did B-Card. And I was like, man, they got to have made this team. And then they had bullpens last, and I went down, and arm was a little sore at the end of the year, so I didn't throw a ton going into that tryout. Had a good curveball in the bullpen session. Fastball felt okay. And he talked to me and maybe one other guy after our bullpen sessions and said, you got, one of the best curveballs I've seen. Would love to have you here. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. What about my buddies? And he said, they're good. They had great tryouts, but we have returning all-stars at both their positions. So they're probably not going to make the season to start, but we would love to have you. You got to be back in a week. So I literally turned around, drove back, picked up my stuff, came back. We played for $500 a month. That was pre-tax money, so $250 every 2 weeks. And I ended up living with a farmer and his wife on 400 acres of farmland. I came up there with a plan, and I told the owner and the head coach, who ended up being son and dad, actually, of the team in Chillicothe. I said, hey, I'm here to get out of here. And looking back, that was kind of a gutsy thing to say as soon as I met these people. But my whole thought was, like, I'm here to get exposure and get out of Dodge and get an affiliated ball. And they said, well, that's what we want too. And I knew what I meant, but I didn't know what they meant. So I said, well, what do you mean? Like, I know what I mean, but what do you mean? And they said, look, if you get signed affiliated ball, then we can promote that and we get better quality talent that comes in here for next year. So I was like, okay, I understand. So I went in there, and when I came back up, I met a guy that was named Craig Brown, that was one of the local guys there. And I said, hey, I'm here to get out of here. What about you? And he said, me too, man. So we just sat down and had a plan. And I was like, I feel like I need to get a better changeup. I need to throw more curveballs ahead in counts. I need to work on my fastball inner half to righties. I had certain things I felt like I got dinged for in college a little bit. And that was a place that I could work on it. In worst case scenario, I got a little bit better, even if my numbers suffered a little bit. So I went in there, and we were diligent every day. We meet each other at the gym. We get our workouts in. We get our running in. We eat lunch together. He had a pretty good year. He had tough time with offense some games. So his win-loss record wasn't as good as it could have been. But I think I had I had 4 complete games. I think I was like 7-4 that year with a 2.8. I was right around the league leaders for strikeouts, which I'm not a strikeout guy. So what I was doing was working. I had fully intended on coming back there. I was lucky enough to get invited to spring training with the Brewers after playing there, and they were gracious enough to let me out of my contract to pursue my dreams there. And fast forward a little bit further, but once I got to the big leagues, I thought that there had been 1 or 2 other guys. That was in '94 that year, and when I got to the big leagues in 2000, I thought there was multiple people that had made it to the big leagues before me. And the commissioner of the league had reached out to me and said, hey, congrats on being the first person. He had faxed me that when I was in my hotel. And I was like, wait, I'm the first one. I thought this guy had been there before. He's like, no, you're the first. And I ended up getting called up on the 18th. I got called up on Father's Day in 2000. June 18th is when I got the call. And then I ended up pitching on the 20th at Arizona. And literally like a week later, there was another guy that was like the Babe Ruth of the Frontier League. He ended up getting called up for, I want to say the Red Sox, and ended up singling against Messina, I think his first at bat for the Orioles. So just beat him by a couple days, literally. I had a good debut. He had a good debut. So I think the Morgan Burkhart Trophy is like for the MVP of the league. I'm for the Brian Tolberg Award is like the Cy Young version for the award. So it's very humbling, obviously, to have your name used that way. And the people were just really, really great. I say that every time I have a chance to talk about Chillicothe. The people were just so genuine, and we're happy to have you there because it's not a big city. There's not a lot of hoopla that goes around there. So we were like the big people in town. And so they made you feel welcome. They had cookouts for you all the time. The people I lived with were fantastic. So they ran a first-class organization as well. So for me, anything I could do moving forward, obviously that was a big help for them to promote the league, me get to the big league. So anything I could do from that point on, I tried to help with their promotion of the league and Chillicothe in particular. So have nothing but good memories, have nothing but good things to say about them. One of the things I used to do was I had a pay stub from one of my paychecks, and I used to have that in my wallet. So if there were times where I felt like I was too big for my britches or whatever, my head got a little big, I pulled that out and take a look, and it kind of brought me back to reality and made me realize where I came from. And, this game can humble you. They say this game will humble. There's 2 types of players. Those have been humbled or those that will be humbled soon. So I probably went off a little tangent on that, but really, really good memories. So I have nothing but good things to say about Chillicothe. And they've since moved into the Midwest version of like the Cape Cod League. So it's actually a summer league team, and they ended up winning the championship this year for the Prospect League, it's called now. So I'll get up there again and go catch up with the coaches and the players. Things have changed in the front office and such, but I'll get back up there at a certain point here soon. I went up to they put me in the Frontier League Hall of Fame several years ago, so I went up with one of my sons and my wife. They retired my number, so they've been very, very good to me. So it's been a lot of fun.
You know, that's what's so cool about hearing stories like that on like independent ball and all that. When you start talking about, like, the average person doesn't realize how little amount of money it is. Like, even in affiliated ball during that time, they still wasn't getting paid that much. And then you gotta go out there and go to work 8 hours a day and try to get better at your craft. And you're sitting there thinking about money in the back of your mind. You know, people say, oh, well, you don't really think about money, or you try not to. But at the end of the day, if you're worried about, hey, if I mess up here, how am I going to survive?
Right.
You know, that's kind of and that's what's so impressive about your story. And that's what's cool about hearing it, because I've had some recent buddies that have gotten released by affiliated teams, you know, and they get into independent ball and kind of feel like they can't see daylight at the end of the tunnel. You hear your story and all the success you've had. Heck, that's enough right there, motivation. And I know the numbers. I'd like to crunch the numbers, because, you know, just guys that get to the big leagues, the traditional way, just get drafted at a high school or college, you know, that's a low number in itself.
Right.
But for a guy to go undrafted, play independent ball, that's
real
impressive,
tiny.
man. Yeah, it probably ain't even 1/10% of guys that have done, you know, which is insane when you think about it.
I'm sure you play with a lot of guys too, Colby, that, you know, are married with a kid or stuff like that. I have no idea how you make that work. I was very fortunate. It was just me, and my parents, you know, helped me any way they could as well. I mean, all I needed was enough to fill my car up and to eat dinner sometimes, because there weren't spreads after games necessarily or anything. So, you know, I was there purely for the joy and for the opportunity to get playing into affiliated ball. I wasn't there for the money. I never played minor league or big leagues necessarily for the money. I mean, it's nice, obviously, and the kind of numbers that, you know, people are making these days, you know, get it if you can. But for me, it was never really about the money. It was just because I love the game, and, you know, you're going to pay me to play a kid's sport. You know, I'll do this as long as humanly possible. So, but no, I think a lot of guys went to pro ball and it was even unaffiliated pro ball. They went there and it was just like, hey, this is, you know, fun. I don't have to worry about college. I don't have to worry about studying. And I was like, you know, when I talked to guys there, because I've gone back in the past, I had a bobblehead night that they had one, you know, when I had my Tommy John. So I came back and talked to some people. I'm like, you better have a purpose of why you're here. Otherwise it's, you know, going to be one and done. When I went back and got inducted into the Hall of Fame, it was over All-Star weekend, and we watched the games, and there's guys pumping like 94 with nasty stuff and big, strong guys. I'm like, this is so much better quality of talent wise. It was good when I was there. Most of the guys, they were lacking one tool, and that's why they slipped through the cracks and went to a independent ball versus affiliated ball. Whether it was, you know, guy could swing it, but the defense was bad. Guy couldn't run, but he had a cannon. Good fastball, no breaking ball. They were missing something. Now there's some dudes, and you know, at all levels. So you better have a plan on what you're doing here. What specifically are you going to work on while you're here? Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and you're wasting your time. And so, you know, you better have a purpose of why you're here. And what was cool when I was in the minor leagues for San Diego, I ended up getting traded to San Diego in '97 after 2 years with the Brewers. But when I got to the big leagues, we had a picture one spring training. I think the next spring training in 2001, we had a picture taken, and there was probably 20, 25 guys that they had signed out of indie ball. So like for me, like I was a Pied Piper, I was the first one, and it gave all these guys, you know, not all of them were signed out of the Frontier League at the time, but like they kind of looked up to me in a sense, because they're like, well, if you made it, I can maybe make it. And so it was kind of cool to hear their stories as well, and just show them like, man, if, you know, the only person that's going to really dictate whether or not you make it is you. It's not your parents. It's not your coaches. It's you. So what are you willing to do to make that a possibility? Not even a reality, but a possibility. So, and I feel like a lot of people don't gut check themselves a lot. I mean, they're just happy to be there and, hey, I'm in A ball, or hey, I'm here. It's like, well, next year they're going to bring a brand new crop of kids in, and you're either going to move up or you're going to, see the door. So that window's tight, man. I got to get after it while I can. So, and I was fortunate that, I had people kind of push me even when I got to the big leagues, and I thought like, hey, I made it. Like, this is my dream from 5 years old. My dad's like, no. He's like, shut your mouth, go put your head down and continue to work to get better. You can come up for air when the end of the season is, but you haven't made anything. You just got there. And one of my buddies, when I was in AAA, when I got called up, we went out to dinner the day I got called up on that Father's Day. And he said, this is going to sound stupid, but it's not hard to get there. It's hard to stay there. And I didn't know what he meant at the time, but very, very appropriate words. Because there's a lot of guys you see that, even in minor leagues, they get their, AA for a couple games and then they hit a rough stretch and you never see them again. And that might be the end of their career. So, for me, it was never getting complacent. Even in the big leagues, never get complacent, because every guy in the minor league complex wants your job. So you better have a plan and just continue to try to get better every single day. So
something you said I thought was pretty cool in a roundabout way. You were talking about you were saying your dad said you hadn't done anything yet. And I think that's pretty cool, because like for me personally, I've thought about, like, for myself, my parents have actually kind of came the other way at it. And then I was kind of thinking, like, if you do something and you invest this as much time as we do into it,
mm-hmm.
You definitely don't want to be in another state, gone, not making any money, barely getting by, prolonging life a little bit if you don't make it,
right,
and not do well.
Right.
And it's like if you're there and then you hear a guy like you with your story and you just ignore the percentages and the odds and all that and just go to work, good things happen. And that's what's cool is, like, the complacent person says, okay, well, I've had this success to this point and it's good and I've enjoyed it and it's all, and I think that goes into your career now as a coach, like, obviously you've had all the success in the world as a player. Now I feel like the same thing, that same mentality has to go into you as a coach,
Well, and I'm sure you see there's certain guys in clubhouses that, the negative guys, mindset wise, whether it's the pitchers or why am I not having things go my way or whatever, instead of just continuing that work ethic and the process, not worrying about the results necessarily. I think we're so results focused versus the process. So for me as a pitcher, the balls and strikes and the hits given up and the first pitch strike percentage, all that's a result. How do I get better results? Well, the process. If the process is better, I didn't necessarily realize that at the time, but I was not one of the people that, I used to punish myself a little bit. If I had a rough stretch, I wouldn't enjoy life. Like on a day off, instead of going golfing or go see a movie, I'm like, I didn't pitch well enough to deserve to do that. So I need to continue to work. That was how I was. And then I was like, this sucks. Like I am an unhappy individual. And at around AAA, I realized like this game is going to bury you unless you kind of enjoy the ride here. Continue to get better. But once you step, off the field, take, whatever lessons, the good ones and the bad ones, and then let it be. And then, go do something else. And so I feel like, to your point, I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to, I had no problem reaching out to coaches and going, hey, I feel like this is not so good. What do you think? And listening, and having an open ear, because for the Brewers and for the Padres, I was very blessed to have a lot of really, really quality coaches at the minor league level, especially pitching coaches. And so I just shut up and listened. And it was really cool at times where we just have a day off and we'd go to a bar and grill or something in our towns and, we just shoot the breeze and just talk shop. And I don't think people do that a lot nowadays. It wasn't a sports psychologist or this or that. It was just like, hey, if this happens, what would you do? And why would you do that? And you just started to think about stuff so that when it happened in a game, you're like, man, we already talked about this. So I think I think, and I don't knock my dad. I mean, I felt pretty good. I mean, I was only when they called me up in 2000, I was only supposed to be up for 3 starts. I mean, when they pulled me in the office and gave me the spiel, I was supposed to be up for 3 starts. The guy was coming off the DL, and I was going back to AAA. And they're like, "Can you do that?" And I was like, 3 more starts than I've ever had in my life. So heck yeah, I could do it. So I was ecstatic, and to be able to call my dad back after I had already talked to him earlier that day, and tell him like, "Hey, like, guess what? What we've always worked for, I got a chance." And I ended up winning that first game in Arizona. I threw a 1-hitter over 7 innings. I was player of the game that game. We went to Cincinnati. It couldn't have played out any better. We were on a 12-game road trip. So we went to Arizona, we went to Cincinnati, and then we went to LA. And then we were off for All-Star break, I believe. And I was only going to pitch the first 2. I was going to pitch Arizona and the getaway game in Cincinnati. And I ended up having a shutout into the 8th of that game. On turf, day game, and was player of the game that game. So, and I had a bunch of Chillicothe people from the front office and such to be able to come there, and some of my family from Baltimore came and struck out Ken Griffey Jr. looking, and struck out Larkin, like stuff that I'm like, man, I could die tomorrow and I'd be fine. I'd be fine. And then when I got to LA, and I ended up finding out I was like, I got 1 more start, but I've done as much as I can to show that I belong here. And I was given the opportunity. So that's what they said, at the outset, do what you can with it and see what happens. Maybe you're a September call-up. Well, I ended up winning the NL Player of the Week that first week in the big leagues. And our assistant GM told me in LA, because I said, hey, I got rent due. Like, I know I got 1 more start, but we're the end of the month. I need to pay rent. So he's like, we'll fly you back over All-Star break, and you're going to come back for the rest of the season here. So I was like, okay. So I could have got, and I probably called my dad and said, hey, I'm here, I'm staying. And he's like, no, shut up, put your head down, continue to work or whatever. And I'm glad I had certain people, him and my mom most of the time, but just that when I thought I was going good, no, just shut up and just continue to what got you there. And then at the end of the year, let's see what you did. And, I was a nobody. I was a number 4 starter, number 3 starter in the big leagues. I was not an all-star caliber player or anything. And I'm totally fine with that fact. But, I was top 20 rookies in the big leagues that year. I've got, Cy Young awards named after me. So, when it's all said and done, I got to play with some Hall of Famers and learn a lot from them and make some good friendships along the way. So for me, I wouldn't have changed any way I did growing up. So.
Oh yeah. I can tell you this, man, if I ever threw 1 pitch past Ken Griffey Jr., I would be talking about that every day for the rest of my life. So much less on 3 of them. So
yeah. I don't know if I threw him by him. He swung at 1 of them. I went 3-0, 3 fastballs away, thinking I had to throw it harder than I needed to, and this was the bottom of the first against them. So it was 3-0, and then I threw one like middle away that he took. I threw a curveball like a little bit down that he swung through, and then we did a little shake, fastball in, and he froze. He took it looking, and then just put his helmet down, took his batting gloves off, and I walked off going, I just struck out Ken Griffey Jr. So it was it was pretty cool. So anyway, it was a surreal moment, and all you're trying to do is execute pitches. You're not thinking that my big league debut, I thought I was going to have a heart attack and throw up on the back of the mound, and your heart's racing, you're sweating, but then you realize like this is no different than AAA or AA or Chillicothe. It's execute pitch by pitch, have a plan, and go out there and hit your spots. And I was very fortunate. I had a great catcher both those games. Carlos was fantastic, Carlos Hernandez, and and he made it easy for me. I told him when I got that award, part of that award goes to him just because it was so easy to throw to him. So
I got a quick question for you. Just the one guy when you made it to the bigs, the one guy that you knew from the moment you stepped in the locker room with him, that was going to be your dude. You guys were going to hang out and be best buddies to your dying day. Who is that one guy?
I don't know if anybody in that regard. I mean, there was a bunch of guys. We were young that year. We had a lot of injuries. So there was a bunch of guys that I played with in like AA and AAA that I got to know over the course of that time. Matt Clement was a buddy of mine. Kevin Walker was a buddy of mine. A lot of those guys had been up there, were established, had wife, kids. I was single and, was just happy to be there, quite honestly. So I wasn't there going, hey, I want to be your best friend for life. Or, I didn't look at it in that lens. One of the things that my buddy, when we went out to dinner, he's like, hey, people don't care about your opinions up there. You're going to be up there for 3 starts, so just shut your mouth and go about your business. So, like, I would go to the training room and do my bands and my light dumbbells and ice and whatever. I didn't say anything to anybody because that's what he told me. Like, literally, shut up and just, be a ghost. And I was in the training room that first day just doing my work, and Trevor Hoffman was getting some work done, and he like loud talked me to the trainer going, hey, if you were on a new team, would you introduce yourself or whatever? And I was like, hey, I was told to shut my mouth. You didn't care what and so that was kind of a nice little icebreaker with us. And come to find out, he didn't have a throwing partner. So he's like, you want to be my throwing partner? I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So, just if some of that could rub off on me, even though he was a closer, I was a starter. So he was probably one of the most intense, prepared individuals I've ever come across in baseball. And so, just to talk shop, talk mindset, talk recovery. When you're going rough, what do you do? So he was a great guy. And I've talked to him fairly recently. Everybody, it's really cool. Once you get up there, you never want to come back down to the minor leagues, as I'm sure you'll see, Colby. You get a taste of what that's like, and you're like, I never want to go back. Even if it's a rehab start or something like that, you really don't want to, just because it's so different. But everybody was super cool. Brett Boone was a super cool guy. He's like, any bats you need. Because I came up, when I got called up, we're hitting for ourselves. I was on a 4-game road trip when I got called up originally. So I was in Tucson in AAA. So I got like closed for 4 days. And I'm on a 12-day big league trip. So I had to go buy a suit. I had to buy, dress shoes. I had to buy a tie because we got charter flights. So my whole world kind of changed real quick. So I had to adjust really quick. I didn't have a lot of bats. I didn't have anything with me. So Boone was like, whatever you need, take it. Other guys were like, whatever you need, let us know. So guys were really cool. Tony Gwynn was super cool. Klesko was cool. A lot of the guys, like I said, that you played with in the minor leagues, that they got there a little bit earlier. Anything that they could help you out with, they made themselves available. So just a really cool. I mean, we played in my opinion, the toughest division at the time. The NL West was banging back then with, Bonds and San Francisco, and the Dodgers were good. The Rockies were good. The next year after that, the Diamondbacks won the World Series. So, I mean, there was a lot of talent in the NL West at that time frame. So it was a lot of fun to be a part of.
Well, see, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to form the question and ask you, when you stepped in that locker room, what teammates intimidated you. But then you told me about your first week in the big leagues. And if King Griffey Jr. didn't intimidate you, then I know nobody in your own locker room did that.
Well, it's funny because I faced the Diamondbacks that first game, and Tony Womack was the first guy that got in the box against me leading off. And I'm like, and he hit, it was like a 1-1 pitch. He hits a rocket down the third base line right to our third baseman, but he catches it, throws it across, and he almost beats that out. And that's a routine play. I'm like, holy smokes, he's running. And you, it's part of, in your back of your mind, you're like, I got this guy's rookie card at home, or, oh, I've seen this guy, do this or do that on TV. And you kind of have to just go, they're just like you. They just do things really well on a consistent basis. And so then it's just, it's execution. Not giving them more credit than they really are due, and just go execute. I mean, because you face guys, on rehab assignments. I'm sure Colby's seen guys that, everybody can be gotten out at any time. It's just, if you make mistakes, they're going to make you pay for them a little bit more. So I faced Bonds when he had 69 home runs. I was the first guy to face him when he was on 69 home runs in 01. I played with Tony in certain times where, like, his last hit was a pinch hit for me in 2001. He hit a double. So, I mean, I played with a lot of guys, and part of me was just I sat back, and anytime I had to be able to sit back, Ricky Henderson was on our team in 01. I just, try to sit next to somebody and ask them questions, like pick their brain, because, Ricky for me is best base runner of all time. So for me, I was like, hey, you're facing a right-handed pitcher and this is the situation. What would you do here? And what would be the toughest thing for you to deal with? And then just listen, just because those guys are so good at what they did. And it was crazy because the higher up you went, the more simplified the thought process was. It was not technical. And that's what that was one of the things that really threw me a little bit, because I thought it'd be like, hey, this is like the secret sauce up here. And it's not. It's just guys that are super prepared, super athletes, but they just simplified. Hitting wise, fielding wise, pitching wise, they just simplified. And then if they had a bad outing, they knew how to process it and just flush it and be ready for the next one. And so the mental side of it was and those are the guys that stuck. I mean, the guys that played 10, 15 years, those are the guys that were really, really good with the mental side of it. The physical tools may not be there. I mean, a lot of guys, like the utility guys, blew me away, like how they could be ready to pinch hit against a dude in the 7th inning and be able to come in there and hit a bullet somewhere and drive in a couple runs, and you're cold for 6 innings leading up to that situation, and they do it all the time. Or they go out and make a great defensive play and they're sitting for 6 of the innings or 7 of the innings. I was like, man, that is so unbelievable mentally, how strong you have to be to not only be in those situations but excel in those situations. So it was cool. We had a great group of guys. Like I say, we had injuries along the line, my parts of 4 years that I was up there, but great guys and great ownership group. Boach, who I played for, was fantastic. I got to see him this past January at the ABCA convention in Chicago and talked to him a little bit. Had some great pitching coaches there as well. So a lot of good people there in San Diego. If you have never been to San Diego, not a bad place to play for your home games. Weather's like incredible, and you're wearing flip-flops and eating sushi for dinner, and like it's very laid back way of life, and it was very nice while I was there.
I imagine so. And then be able to coin probably the best base runner of all time, best pure hitter of all time, and definitely a top 3 or 4 closer of all time to play with. So
had them all three.
That's unreal.
My dad was one on 2000. In 01, he said, hey, you need to get a ball signed by all 3. You got 3 Hall of Famers on your team at once. And it never dawned on me that in that regard. And so I went to Tony first, because Tony was, as good as he was, one of the best hitters of all time. He was, you could ask him anything and he'd be straight up with you. And I got a bunch of bats from him and, jerseys signed from him and whatever. So very gracious guy. But I said, hey, can I get 3 of you guys signed on a ball? And he said, ask Ricky first, because Ricky's not going to sign anything if somebody else has already signed. So just say, hey, Ricky, can you sign these 3 balls? And then once he signs them, then bring them to me and Trev, and we'll sign them after that. So I got 3 or 4 balls signed, and my dad's got one, and, so pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I got a lot of, I didn't know how long I'd be up there. I don't know, Colby, if you're a memorabilia guy, but I got a lot of stuff on the walls that I've collected over time. I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, so I want to get some stuff saved and jerseys signed and whatever. So if guys were people that I was big fans of, I got in AAA, I played for the Round Rock Express. Nolan Ryan owned that team at the time, so I got a rainbow Astros jersey personalized from him. I got Maddox signed a jersey for me. Tony, Ricky, Larry Walker. I was a big Roger Clemens fan growing up, so I got pinstripe autographed jersey and a Red Sox autographed jersey from him. So I got all kinds of stuff, and I think it's super cool. Whether my kids think it's cool right now or not, their dads think it's pretty cool. But I just I was always thinking.
Well, the thing that's cool about that too is, like, I feel like I mean, there's probably a percentage of guys that aren't, but like the guys that play in the big leagues, it seems like to me they grew up baseball fans.
Yeah.
You know, and then you turn away from, okay, I'm not a fan anymore. I'm a player, and I can't get, you know. But at the end of the day, to your core, you still love the game, and you still love the players that you grew up seeing and playing with, or whatever.
Yep.
And that's what's so cool and so special about baseball. Which I'm sure other sports are that way. But I can tell you right now, if I ever met Albert Pujols, some of those guys, it would be hard to not ask for a few autographs and a few conversations, you know. So.
And what was so cool is, like, I thought it would be looked down upon, I guess. But like Tony would have like 24 balls, so he'd come back from BP, and you know, Dodgers would come into town. There's 24 balls sitting in his, you know, and unless they had like a little special note saying, "Hey, can you sign to so and so from Tony?" Like he'd just sit there and, you know, eat his lunch and sign balls and give them back to the clubby, and he'd run them back over. And so it was not something that you had to be embarrassed about or anything like that. And the clubhouse guys that we had, you know, they know that I like to get balls signed or jersey signed or whatever. So they'd be like, "Hey, do you need anybody signed?" And I was like, "Yeah, I need so-and-so and so-and-so." And there was very few that were tougher to get. Everybody was more than well. I mean, your coworkers basically at that point. So everybody was very gracious to sign stuff. And I played post playing career. I played in a couple of golf tournaments and such. So I got a picture with Phil Necro. He was the reason why I threw a knuckleball in high school. Ozzie Smith, I've had dinner and played golf with him and stuff. And I'm like just people that you're like, how the hell am I having, you know, I'm eating with somebody, and this is a guy that I used to like idolize, and, you know, Dale Murphy I met and hung out with and got some pictures with. And it just, you kind of got to pinch yourself sometimes, and you know, I'm like, I don't want to be one of those guys that go, "Well, I met this guy," and somebody goes, "No, you didn't." And it's like, "Well, yeah, I did, because I got something signed by him." So I don't know who that is for you, Colby. Like, who's your favorite player now?
I mean, I grew up a Pujols guy.
Yeah.
And in pitching, Craig Kimbrell, which luckily I was able to meet Craig Kimbrell. But I was a kid, man. I was 12 years old. This is what was crazy. I was at the Mississippi Braves game, and Craig actually it wasn't even Mississippi Braves. It was Futures versus the Atlanta Braves. And Craig Kimbrell just walks out of a door, and I idolized this guy. I mean, he wasn't a very big guy, throwing hard, power pitcher, and I loved that as a kid. And saw him walk out, and I ran down the grandstands, grabbed the ball I had, run up, got it autographed, sat there and talked to him for a little bit, or heard people talk to him. I would say very small stuff, shy. But and then that same park, I guess it might have been 12, I don't know how many years later, I'm pitching in it. And it was like, it's pretty cool. And that's very small. And shoot, you meeting Hall of Famers, I couldn't even imagine, which, I mean, Craig probably will be one day. I don't know, but definitely not a Tony Gwynn or you know, somebody like that. But yeah, that's a crazy. Yeah, I mean, you've probably met more big leaguers or more Hall of Famers than you haven't met. You know,
it's it's crazy. I went up. Trevor got inducted a couple years ago, and I flew up for that induction ceremony. And on the flight back, I didn't get a chance to talk to him there. I saw some people from the front office and such, and some of the teammates. But on the flight back, I'm walking by first class, and Rod Cruz sitting there with his wife, and I'm like, dude, like, and nobody says nothing. I don't know if anybody knows who it is, and I'm back by like the toilets in the back, and I'm sitting talking to the guy that just Joe Blow sitting next to me, and he goes, "Hey, where are you doing? Why are you here? Whatever." I said, "Freaking Rod Cruz in like first class." And I want to talk to him before he leaves, because I had like a 2-hour layover or something too. So I had time wherever we were going from there. And so he's like, "Well, write a note to him." And I was like, "You know what? You're right." So I got like a little piece of paper, whatever, and I wrote a note, and had the girl getting drinks and whatever walking by. I said, "Hey, can you bring this to the guy down there sitting by the woman, whatever?" And so sure enough, she, you know, I see her walk down as she's serving drinks and snacks, and she hands it to him, and it points back to me and whatever. And then she makes her way back at a certain point. She goes, "He'll meet you outside on the tarmac." And I was like, dude, like how great, like, and so we sat there, and chatted for like 30, 40 minutes because he had a little bit of time in between him and his wife. And we talked about just random stuff and was the nicest guy. I mean, so I think most people are like that. You think that a lot of people are going to be standoffish, and they're not. I mean, as long as you're not rude, as long as you don't come up like middle of dinner with their family and cause a scene, most people will do whatever you need them to do. But I think in today's social media age where, they're trying to do selfies with you or, interrupt you or kind of embarrass you at times, there's a lot of people that it just doesn't go as well as it should. So, but most people that you come across are super cool. I met not a baseball player, but I met Michael Jordan in Orlando one time, and I was like, how many times so many people that I was with at the time were like nervous, like that's Michael Jordan. And I'm like, how many times am I going to get a chance to talk to Michael Jordan? I'm like, I'm a small guy in the grand scheme of things. So I had mutual friends that when he played for the Birmingham Barons that like played outfield with him during that time frame. So I just threw one of those names out there. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I just threw a name out. I was like, hey, he said, what's up? And he's like, da, 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 da. So he's like, pull up a chair. So we sat there and talked for about 30 minutes. And like, it's pretty cool to meet people that you hold in a high esteem. So even though I was nervous as heck and I didn't get anything signed, it's pretty cool. So.
Well, before we shift gears to your post career, I just want to point out my co-host here, the namesake of the show, Kobe White, is a huge Atlanta Braves fan. So I promise you, after he gives up his first career home run to Austin Riley, he's going to pay the guy that catches the ball to bring it back to Riley just so he can sign it and so Kobe can keep it. So
absolutely.
All right.
Well,
so
and
first of all, I sat here in absolute amazement as you literally named every baseball superstar that I grew up watching. Like I felt like I was, 13 or 14 or 15 years old again. It was
there
really
were only two stations. It was TBS or WGN.
It was really scary the way you were just naming off player after player. I mean, Tony Gwynn, by far my most favorite player of all time. He is the reason that I picked up a baseball for the first time. That's why I took so much pride when I had a bat in my hand.
Yeah.
I came this close to having an opportunity to meet him when he was at San Diego State coaching. His team actually was at a regional at Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi. He was too sick to actually finish that season, so he didn't make it. So that was my one shot at meeting him live because I would have done anything to have actually spoken to him that day.
Yeah.
But so like I said, I felt like you just took me back to my teen years with all these guys you just rattled off. And the sad thing is he was just name dropping them like it's no big deal. Like that's just some of my boys. So
well, and I had no shame. I'll be honest, Colby. I had no shame. So we would play, you name it. We'd play like the Yankees would come in interleague play, and he's like, "Who you want?" I'm like, "I want Mariano. I want Jeter. I want this guy. I want this guy." And so like I got all those guys balls signed. I didn't get jersey signed from a lot of those guys, but I got balls signed. I got a couple Maddox balls. He was my guy when I was in the minor leagues that I kind of looked up to just because he was so dominant. And he had stuff similar to mine, I thought. Well, I had stuff similar to his. He didn't have stuff similar to mine. I got, Randy Johnson, Schilling, Martinez, anybody that was a name, McGuire, Sosa, Bonds, anybody that I could come into contact with, I tried to get something signed. So it was pretty cool. And hopefully my kids appreciate the history of the game a little bit as they get older, and they'll be like, "Oh, you got so-and-so's autograph. That's pretty cool, Dad." And it's not just going to sit here and collect dust. So we'll see.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so now as a in your post-career life, you're still a baseball player. You can't get away from it. It courses through your veins. Tell us a little bit about your passion project you've got, Training Without Borders, because I know that's something that you've been working on. It's constantly about developing young athletes, and I know you're super excited about it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Training Without Borders came up. after I retired in 06, I owned a franchise here, an edible arrangements franchise for 14 years. And then when I got done with that, I reached out to a couple of buddies of mine that had met along the last 10, 12 years and done some baseball events with here, both locally, domestically, and internationally. And I was like, man, I just see there's a need for some things. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but Training Without Borders was several of us kind of came together and said, you got to have a way for us, especially if they're not in your neck of the woods, if they're not local, there's got to be a way to be able to reach those players and really develop them and hold them accountable and be able to get quality instruction to them. And I was very fortunate within the last 5 to 7 years. I was telling William before we went live, I got a chance to get invited to go to do some events in Hong Kong for 3 or 4 years straight. I went to Dubai, Qatar, Kuwait. I've been to Spain, Northern Spain for MLB alumni. So I'm like, this is a pretty cool gig. They're paying me to go internationally, go to like basically take a vacation and then go talk baseball, which is what I love talking about. And these people are starved for information over there for the most part, and are welcoming any kind of advancement that you can bring them. So for us, when we started kind of just throwing ideas around, I was like, well, what if we had a platform where we go just like we used to, and we were just hired help when we went and did those things in the past. But what if we had the ability to go to these places a couple times a year, possibly, nothing crazy, because it's a pretty good flight over there. But go over there a couple times. But in the meantime, in the interim, be able to get some videos sent to you, and you can do voiceover, and you can telestrate on it, and you can add drills that are pertinent to what they need to work on, both for the player or the team or whatever the case may be. And how would that look, and make it affordable for them? How many people fall into that category? And we start thinking about it, and there's so many people. Everywhere we went, they love the information, but the biggest thing I found was the day we were leaving, they're like, when are you coming back? And I was like, I'm just hired help. Like, I'll come back tomorrow if you wanted me to, but that's out of my hands. Well, now it's in our hands, and we have the ability to go anywhere we want. We can set it up anytime, make it affordable. We don't want it to be a one and done necessarily. So we want it to be something that works in people's budgets. And because there's a lot of people that, or even if the situation, if you're, somebody in Tampa and you're with a hitting coach or a pitching coach and you just haven't gotten the results that you've looked for, and it's been a significant amount of time, try something different, and just, throw a couple bucks at it. And if they're giving you the same information that we are going to give you, then maybe, you just need to try to apply it a little bit better. If it's totally different than what you had been previously taught, then maybe there's a problem there. Maybe that's a red flag. So, for me, there's no ego in it. It's just getting kids better. And all I can do is give you the information, and then it's what you do with the information. That's for my sons or kids that are on my Little League team or on the Jesuit baseball team that I'm a high school pitching coach for. Here's the information. This is why I think you can be better. It's what you do with it. So at the end of the day, I think if kids, have some ownership in it and take the information, and don't be afraid to ask, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else do you think I can get better at? Never stop that quest for getting better. It's limitless how many people you really could affect down the road. So that's kind of where Training Without Borders was born from. And we haven't really gone crazy with that. I'm locally here trying to do some things with a couple other friends and kind of expand our footprint here locally. But that's definitely something that we're going to utilize moving forward. And, I just like with Chillicothe, I have nothing but great memories of those people. Same thing for these international locales. They were just fantastic people. Showed us, a love of where they lived and their history and their culture. So for me, I love that kind of stuff. So I would love to be able to not only continue that in the future, but maybe have my kids be able to see that a little bit as well, and take them on some trips intermittently as well. So.
Sounds like a fantastic program. Sounds like something that we should have been doing already. I'm glad that you took the initiative to get it started.
Well, there's people that have done stuff similar. I just feel like there's so many people that you can help, and if you have the right infrastructure and you have something that's user friendly and it's personal, I think too, because I think that there's some that I've seen people that have it's somebody sends a video, they send them a couple drills, and that's it. But like, I've done them before where there's a guy that throws and it's like, oh, you throw a little bit like, Kobe White and he's a guy that's going to be in the big league soon and whatever that, kids like kind of get a little geeked out about those kind of things. Like, oh, I have a balance point like this guy in the big leagues right now. So you make it a little personal and you go, I think a lot of coaches too, they tend to focus on the negative. And I'm like, you got to always lead with some positives. Like, man, you really, and this is whether it's Training Without Borders or local, man, you really are good at this, and this. Unbelievably good for your age. This is where we can get better though. This is really where you can take off by doing this, and this, versus going, you're good at this, you're bad at this. It's just on how you word it, I think. So for me, it's the presentation of it. So I think if, and the people that are with us in this venture are really good communicators. So I think it has a chance when we roll it out completely and we get after it. I think it's got a chance to affect a lot of people. So
fantastic. Kobe, you got a parting shot for our guest today?
Man, we of course we appreciate you being on. It's awesome for me, even if we weren't on the podcast, just to get to talk to a major league pitcher player, especially with one with the success that you've had. I know kids that are listening to this, or dads or whatever, they'll definitely hear some really good things that actually need to be said. You hear a lot of stuff online that's not the good things. It's cool hearing you say the things that you said today. We appreciate you coming on, man.
My pleasure. Anytime I can help you guys out moving forward, let me know.
We have absolutely enjoyed it. We can't thank you enough, Brian.
My pleasure, guys.
All right. For our audio listeners, you'll be going to some commercials. And for our YouTube listeners, you guys can catch us again live next Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central.
That was good.